you alright? Hey, how you doing? Yeah, I'm alright, thanks. Want a Skittle? Yeah, go on then. Oh, shouldn't you be doing your YouTube video? Oh yeah, grab. There you go. Ooh. Okay, so in this tutorial I'm going to show you how you can make a clone of yourself in Final Cut Pro, just like the video you just saw. But before you start, the most important thing is to make sure you get the setup right when you're recording. So let's head back over to Outdoor Jamie. Okay, so the first thing you want to make sure is you got the background right. So you want to make sure there's no moving objects, so nowhere where the wind can blow. And you want to make sure there's no shadow lines, because the shadow lines could move by the time you do the next bit of the clip. So if I was to use this as my background, this is not really ideal because first I've got the leaves and the bushes here, so when the wind moves them you're going to see that. And also I've got these shadow lines, so these shadow lines could move and you're going to notice that too. I actually had to re-record the video because the first time the bench I was using, I didn't realise until I actually got it into the edit that the bench was very flexible. So when I sat on it one side, you could see it move on the other side, and there was ways around it, but it would have just took way too long. It was just so much easier just to re-record. It's also wise, I always just start recording and I won't touch the camera again until I've finished recording. That way the camera can't move position at all. And importantly, you want to make sure the camera is on a tripod. If you haven't got a tripod, just make something that it can sit nice and still on. Right, so I finished recording and now it's time to start editing it all together. I just have a couple more tips about the recording stage that Outdoor Jamie forgot to mention. Don't use autofocus. If your camera is trying to focus on one of the clips, it will be noticeable on the other one and not look right. Also, try not to use auto white balance. It could drastically change within the time you record the second part and will be much harder to fix in post. If you can, it is best to manually set your white balance or use a preset if your camera has that function. Okay, now on to the editing. I've already set up a new project in Final Cut Pro and imported my clip. I'm just going to drag it down onto my timeline. As I recorded it all in one clip, I will first cut it up so that I have the two separate clips cut to where I want them to start and finish. Now I have one clip with me on the left of the bench and the separate clip of me on the right hand side. You now want to drag one clip below the other. So I recorded using a flat profile in S-Log3, so before I go any further I'm just going to add in a LUT to bring the colours back into the picture. This isn't essential to create the effect, but I'm just doing it now to make it look better. Now the two clips are on top of each other, we need to split the screen so that you can see both clips side by side. The way I used to do this was by clicking the one on top and then in the video inspector dragging the right crop tool down. But the problem with this is that there is usually a slight difference in the colour of both clips and that can be seen when cropped. Can you see the obvious line? It doesn't look very professional. So there is a much better way. Head over to the effects and type in mask. We are going to use the graduated mask. Click this and drag it onto the top clip. You will then see two circles appear on the viewer. One is the centre and the other is the target. You can adjust them by dragging the numbers up and down, but it's much easier to just move the circles around yourself. Pull the centre over to the left until it's just before the person starts to disappear. Then pull the target to the right just before the clone starts to disappear. You should now see you and your clone on the same screen. Freaky. Now I'm just going to move the second one around so that the conversation between the two Jamies match up. Okay, perfect. Now I need to extend the beginning of the lower clip, otherwise it will show a black screen there. Unfortunately, I didn't leave enough time before walking on, so I cut it at the frame where I'm no longer in view, and then at the start of that, I added a freeze frame. To do this, go to Edit and then Add Freeze Frame. It has put these two clips in a storyline, so to move them about you can right click them and then click on Lift from Storyline. Then drag the freeze frame to the beginning and cut it so it sits next to the main clip. Play it to make sure it looks okay. If you wanted, you could just leave your clone video here and be finished with the effect, but I wanted it to look like I was passing my clone some Skittles. But if you notice, when the skittle bag passes over the centre, it starts to disappear. So to fix this, you need to mask it. First, make a duplicate of the clip you want to mask by holding the Option key and then at the same time dragging the clip down. You should now have two the same. Make sure they are lined up with each other. Then make a compound clip of the top one by right clicking it and then New Compound Clip. On the bottom one, delete the graduated mask by clicking on the effect in the inspector and then hitting delete, and then add a draw mask to it instead. We're going to add the control points around the object that needs to be masked. So to make it easier, you can zoom in on the viewer and then add the points around the object, like this. When you add the final control point, the lower clip should appear again. If you right click on the control point, you can turn it from linear to smooth if the edge isn't straight. Drag the white lines to adjust the curvature. I usually keep one side dragged down to make it easier to adjust. If you've never done this before, it can take some getting used to. That's great, but as the object moves, the mask doesn't move with it, so we're going to have to add keyframes. In the inspector, under the draw mask effect, click the yellow keyframe diamond next to position, rotation, scale and control points. You might not end up changing all of them, but I always click each one just in case. Then, move forward a few frames and reposition the mask. You may be able to just move the whole thing, or you might have to readjust each control point. To make it easier, where it says composites under draw mask in the inspector, change this to original so you can see the object better. Then keep moving the frame forward and readjusting the mask. I've just noticed that the original graduation mask is too far over to the left and is covering part of my arm. So I'm just going to click back onto the compound clip and move it over a bit. Yeah, that's better. Now back to the draw mask. Make sure each frame has got the correct position and adjust accordingly. As I start to tilt the bag, I can change the rotation to make it easier. When you are finished, change the view back to composite and play it back to make sure it looks okay. And that looks really good, but I also want the skittles to show as they are falling out of the bag, so I have to add another draw mask. If I just add it to the same clip, it doesn't work, so I made a duplicate of the clip by holding Alt and dragging it down and then adding a new draw mask to the one on top. I then added the control points around the area that they are falling. To get them to appear, go to the first draw mask we made and then click the invert mask box. You can notice this part where I've gone over the brown bit of the bench where the colour change is noticeable. Luckily the skittles don't fall there and I can drag it back a bit so it's not noticeable. If it was, I would probably have to add a draw mask around each skittle and then keyframe them all individually, which would have been a right pain in the bottom. You can also adjust the feather to make it blend a bit more if needed. Once the skittles are finished falling, I don't need this mask anymore, so head over to the inspector and click the keyframe next to opacity. Then move forward one frame and turn the opacity to 0, making sure it automatically adds a new keyframe. This means it won't get in the way when the clone's arm moves up past it. Let's play it back to see what it looks like. I didn't bother masking out the arm as it moves up past the graduated mask because it is moving so fast that it just looks like motion blur anyway. Now that looks good, but you can hear the skittles falling on the ground, so I will cut the sound out. Because you can still hear the ambient noise from the other clip, you can't hear the silence, so I don't need to cover it up. Okay, so I could end this now by just cutting the original Jamie clip where I want him to disappear and it would look fine. But as an added touch, I want to make the skittle bag remain and fall to the ground. So to do that, I'm going to select each of the clips containing original Jamie and make a compound clip out of them. I will then find a point that I want him to disappear. Here you can cut the clip using the blade tool or by pushing Command and B. Then add a draw mask to the last portion and draw the control points around the skittle bag. The bag should now remain while the person disappears. Now we are going to need to keyframe the position of the mask so that it falls with the bag. Let's zoom in to get a closer look. First I'm going to add a slight feather to make it blend and look more natural. Click all the keyframe buttons in transforms and control points. Then change the composite view to original so we can see where it moves to. Now it's just a case of moving each frame and then readjusting the control points just like we did before. I'm also going to turn some of the control points to smooth for the curved lines on the bag. Play it back to see how it looks. It might not even be that noticeable to the viewer, but it's a nice added feature. Now I just need to cut the audio to just after the bag lands on the floor and I am done. So one last thing I've noticed is that the clips I recorded are a bit wonky. So to fix this I'm going to turn everything into a compound clip. Select everything and then press Option and G. Now to get a more accurate position, click on View in the top right of the viewer and then click on Show Horizon. This will give you a yellow cross which you can reference against. If you have a plugin that shows you more grid lines, then use that instead. Then, making sure your compound clip is selected, move the rotation in the inspector until your image looks right. You will now notice that there are black areas showing around the edge of the video. To fix this, just zoom in a little bit by pulling the scale all slider up until the black bits disappear. We are only scaling in a tiny amount, so it shouldn't affect the framing of the video too much. Okay, so there is more dead space on the left side of the screen, so I'm just going to move the X position over to the left to the point just after the black space disappears. There, that looks better. And now we are done. And that is how you make a realistic clone of yourself in Final Cut Pro. Well, I hope you enjoyed that tutorial and you found it useful. If you did, then give it a like to let me know. If you created your own clone video, then leave a link in the comments below and I'll be sure to check that out. So this channel is based around filmmaking and learning how to create videos. So if that's something that interests you, then give it a subscribe and you'll see more content coming from me. And as always, thank you so much for watching and I will see you again in the next video. Goodbye.